Hey, what's up, y'all? And of course, welcome to another Alternative Factuals video. So I'm going to try and break this down as best as possible. This is going to serve the question on the history of Isaiah Bradley according to the MCU. This is just kind of a prediction, but also some information we were given in the Falcon and Winter Soldier, as well as answer why was Isaiah Bradley pretty much kept a secret in the United States government and why did they throw him in jail. But before I dive into any of those, subject matters and topics, please be sure to like, share, and of course subscribe. Leave your comments down below. Let me know what you're thinking. Let me know what you're feeling. And yeah, I hope to see you. Obviously, I hope to see you later on because I'm about to wrap it up already. But yeah, so let's kind of just dive into things. So what we know so far is that Isaiah Bradley is indeed himself a super soldier. Now, he was not given the same formula as Captain America, for example, because Dr. Erskine was killed shortly after administering it to Steve Rogers, so we do know for a fact that is not the case. Now, his history serves basically as he kind of was someone who was involved in the Vietnam War, and he was a part of the Weapons Plus program in order to, like I said, recreate the super soldier serum that kind of Captain America was a part of. Now, what we know for a fact is that him and Winter Soldier kind of had this interaction during the Vietnam War. Now, for many of you who maybe, you're not too crazy about history, or maybe history is not one of your strong suits, the Vietnam War took place November 1st, 1955, all the way through April 30th, 1975. So that's actually a nice chunk of history. That's 30 years. I'm sorry, I said 30 years, 20 years in which, the Vietnam War was taking place. So he was very much alive then, and so was, I'm pretty sure, a lot of people's parents, and then some people who are even watching these videos. I look at my analytics, so some of y'all were actually alive during that point in time when the Vietnam War was going on in real life. So in the MCU, the same thing is very much prominent. Isaiah Bradley was fighting the Winter Soldier during the Vietnam War, and we already know that Bucky and Captain America, they were active during World War II, which is September 1st, 1939 all the way to 1945. So literally the war was only over, well, at least a war was only over for approximately 10 years before people started fighting all over again. Now, what does that say? So during Civil War, I said Civil War II, but the World War II, for example, we do know that Captain America was around at least for a part of it before he was kind of buried in ice, blah 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 blah, all that stuff. That means during that point in time, between then and all the way to the Vietnam War, what we do know is that Isaiah Bradley came into existence. Now, also other events that kind of lined up in this kind of sequential small window was the fact of the matter was, in the movie, we had Armin Zola, who lost the Civil War during, that whole point when it was over. Not the Civil War. I keep saying Civil War because I'm thinking about the movie. But they lost World War II. And then the American government had, reintroduced those German scientists, who some of them were working for Hydra, ultimately reintegrated them into the United States government, created S.H.I.E.L.D., and then Hydra was growing inside of S.H.I.E.L.D. And some people were wondering, how does Isaiah Bradley and how does the Winter Soldier kind of coincide? Well, remember, Armin Zola created the Winter Soldier shortly after he fell off that train, as we saw during, I believe it was the Winter Soldier, and it kind of expanded on it a little bit more during the Civil War, the movie. So we do know that this was going on, and he was actually created to be the Winter Soldier, and obviously he was fighting in wars during his lifetime, as well as all the way into the present, because obviously he's still alive. Now, what does this have to do with Isaiah Bradley? I mentioned this in the last video, or not the last video, but the video before last, was that Isaiah Bradley and the Winter Soldier quite possibly have the same serum flowing in their kind of in their veins. However, I believe, and this is what I truly, utterly believe, was that it's a possibility that, Isaiah Bradley, he got like a relatively complete version of the Winter Soldier serum, the same serum that gave Bucky his abilities, which makes him comparable to Captain America, where he's able to run absurdly fast, he has enhanced strength, he can jump off a moving airplane from hundreds of feet and not take really any damage. The same serum, which is why he's an older man who can still throw a little tin can of Altoids through a wooden wall easily. So that's something I want people to realize as well. So I think what happened was, at least this is what I'm theorizing. Remember, none of this is a guaranteed fact until Marvel says it is. What I think is going on here was the Winter Soldier was created first, in terms of the order in which he was actually, given the serum and kind of went out to operate as an agent. And then once they were rolled into the United States government, and then the Winter Soldier became a very prevalent threat during the Vietnam War, in order to make the German scientists seem like they were on the side of the America, they somehow gave them, or came up with, in air quotes, this serum, this new Captain America serum that made him comparable to the Winter Soldier, which is why he ended up beating up the Winter Soldier during their first encounter. So he was the only person to kind of encounter the Winter Soldier, beat him, and actually survive the encounter. So I think that's what happened. Now, knowing Hydra, they would not want, the American government, because at this time during the Vietnam War, Hydra was not at its full power. It wasn't at the full height of what it was capable of, like we saw during Captain America the Winter Soldier, when S.H.I.E.L.D. was being completely taken over, because pretty much half the organization, and I'm not saying literally half, but I'm assuming approximately about half the organization was Hydra. So they didn't reach a point in which they could completely take over, but Hydra was not stupid either. They would not be the type to give them a serum or a completed version of the Winter Soldier serum that could make their soldiers comparable to the Winter Soldier or their other Winter Soldiers in which they had frozen or had on ice. So what would Hydra do? What would, Armin Zola do? He would give them a serum, but he probably gave him a beta version of that serum or an earlier version of that serum, just so, yeah, he could fight, he can do all these things, and he won't have any adverse effects immediately, but, eventually it'll have some adverse effects on what he's capable of doing and how he's able to perform long term. So that's what I'm saying, like, it definitely is, a correlation, which is eventually why Bucky knew exactly where he was, because one, not only were the Hydra files released online, but also Bucky, being that he was under their control for such a long period of time, he had access to that information as well, which is why he knew exactly where he lived, who he was, what house he was living in, what neighborhood. He knew everything about him in order to be able to get to him, because believe it or not, they were one and the same in a sense. They were brothers in arms, so to speak, when it came to the whole Winter Soldier serum. So they kind of were, I guess, in some way, shape, or form, related, not like by blood, but just by circumstance. So that's why Bucky knew everything about him. Now, why was he kept such a secret? Well, one thing is he went to jail. And the reason why he went to jail is obviously the Vietnam War took place between 1955 and 1975. This also overlaps with, segregation, all the way to the point in which segregation was actually officially ended, like completely, even though some places were still practicing, some forms of Jim Crow law, but let's not get into that discussion. But basically, even though he was a war hero in the MCU, even though he was a person who actually was able to defeat the Winter Soldier in straight hand-to-hand combat and was able to kind of wash him and take off his mechanical arm, the problem is he was black. So unfortunately, during this point in time, the government could not have a black man who was filled with all this, serum, who was an equal to the Winter Soldier. They was not going to let him go live his regular life, because at this point in time, the government was very much biased towards black people. They didn't like the black people. The FBI went out and literally single-handedly destroyed the Black Panther Party, which was not a terrorist organization by any means. It was an organization that was supposed to be there to, uplift the community, and they destroyed that organization. So imagine a super soldier, a black super soldier. Do you really think the government is going to allow him to live his normal life with anyone else? Absolutely not. So, of course, they throw him in jail knowing that he did nothing wrong. He actually served his country way better than most people could ever dream to serve their country. Got thrown in jail as an excuse for them to keep constantly drawing his blood, experimenting on him, finding out how to duplicate Isaiah Bradley, his abilities and what he was capable of for years and years and years. And then when they felt like his powers or his abilities were not as, important, or maybe when his abilities start to kind of take a negative side effect on him physically and mentally, that's when they decided, okay, we can let him go. We use him for what we needed to use him for, and he's not really important right now. So I guess we can just let him go live out the rest of his life in shame, even though the black community, his family, people who knew his family, everyone knew he was a legend. Even in comic books, he was known to be a legend only in the black community, and only black superheroes like the Falcon, Black Panther, Luke Cage, they knew about Isaiah Bradley and what he did for the United States, even though the United States really treated him like crap. And I'm pretty sure they're going to follow that same sentiment in the MCU, where even though he came after the Winter Soldier, even though he was the one who was able to beat the Winter Soldier, and even though he was the one who was technically a war hero because he managed to, you know, defeat the Winter Soldier during the Vietnam War, even though it ended in 1975, he still went to jail for, I think he said about, 25, 30 years. So it wasn't even until like, 2005 where he was able to come out and live the rest of his life. And technically he couldn't really work the same way everybody else could because he had a record. He had a jail record, which is something the government in real life has done to many people. To many people in the Black Panther Party who were thrown in jail for no absolute reason. Some of them were cleared, and some of them, those rights, some of those charges were vacated. But unfortunately, the fact that they even had to go through that in general, we do know that the government is just as capable of doing stuff like that. So that's kind of the biggest reason why Isaiah Bradley has been like this really large secret, because the Black community knows what the government would have done. So the Black community hid him. They didn't make it obvious. He pretty much, as you can see, stayed in the house. Someone answers the door for him. If someone comes looking for him, they just would be like, nah, he's not here. Like, unless you know him, that's the only time he's gonna really, take the time to talk to you. But the Black community protected him, kept him a secret, because the government was not supporting him the way that they should have, despite everything he did for the United States. Let me know in the comments down below what you think, and if you kind of agree with this timeline of how things probably played out in the MCU. Let me know. We'll probably find out on Friday if I'm correct or not, but let me know in the comments down below. And if you're new to the channel, please be sure to like, share, and of course subscribe, and I hope to see you later on. Peace out.